Okay, welcome to the November Virtual Planetarium, and we're going to start, as we normally do, with the planets and Mercury. And Mercury actually is pretty good at the beginning of November, as it rises about 100 minutes before sunrise.
Yes, for most of the month, Mercury is approaching superior conjunction. That finally occurs on the 29th of November. But despite losing separation from the Sun, Mercury's brightness increases throughout the month. In fact, it goes from magnitude minus 0.8 at the start on the 1st of November, all the way up to minus 1.2 by the end of the month. So a good time to try and find Mercury because it will be quite prominent, quite bright in the morning sky.
Okay, that's good. And on the 15th of November, magnitude minus 0.9, Mercury sits 4.5 degrees of from mag, plus 1.6 Mars. So both planets will rise around 50 minutes before the Sun. So if you've been missing Mars, which was at conjunction last month, then this is a time when you may actually get to see both planets and see the planet Mars. The Mars, of course, is getting back into the morning sky. It's going to take ages and ages to get into a good position again. But it is heading towards another opposition at the end of 2022. So that's something to look forward to with the red planet.
Absolutely. But as you say, Pete, you'll need a large aperture telescope to image or see anything on the surface at all, because it is a very long way away from us.
Okay,
the planet Venus. This is still an evening object. It's suffering from being in the southern part of the sky, so in the southern ecliptic. It's currently in Sagittarius, and as we know from Jupiter and Saturn, anything that's in Sagittarius is very low down from the UK.
Yeah.
It is very bright, of course, magnitude minus 4.7, but the best way to see it, as I have been saying throughout these VPs for the last few months, is during the daytime sky. And if you put a telescope onto Venus at the moment, during this time, you'll see that it's actually now entered the crescent stage, which I think is your favourite part of the Venus cycle, isn't it?
Oh, it's fantastic, yeah, when it reaches the crescent. And it's quite mesmerising to watch it as it starts to get thinner and thinner as it approaches, or apparently approaches, the Sun on the earthward side of its orbit. But it's going to be setting about 100 minutes after the Sun on the 1st of November, and that figure increases to about 150 minutes by the end of the month. So conditions are getting slightly better for Venus.
Yes, and things to watch out for whilst Venus is in the crescent stage is this interesting effect that can happen with the cusp edges. These are the horns, if you like, of Venus when it's in the crescent stage. They can become very brilliant. They can look blunted. They can look at slightly different shape. And these are a very interesting phenomena to watch out for. They have been imaged and they have been drawn, so they are definitely a real phenomena, and we never know when they might occur. So it's a good idea to keep observing Venus as frequently as possible.
Okay, well, on the 1st of November, Venus, through a telescope, will look just less than half lit. In theory, it should be 47% lit at that time, with an apparent diameter of 25 arc seconds, which is very reasonable. But by the end of the month, the phase will have reduced quite dramatically to 28% lit, and its apparent diameter will have increased again quite dramatically to 38 arc seconds. So there's big changes happening with Venus through a telescope.
Yeah, and this bit of the orbit happens quite quickly. So you if you don't observe Venus for a couple of days, maybe a week or so, which is very likely given the clouds cover in the UK in this time of year, You'll notice that the phase will be quite different and the planet will be a bit bigger.
We're talking of phases. There's an 11% lit waxing crescent moon to the west of Venus on the 7th of November, and to the east of Venus on the 8th of November as a 20% lit waxing crescent. So that's something to look out for if you haven't got any equipment. It's always a beautiful sight to see the crescent moon near Venus.
Yes. Well, moving on now to the outer planet Mars. It's a morning object, as we've said already. very close to the sun to be seen properly at the start of the month, but it does start to get a significant separation away from the sun, so that plus 1.6 Mars, which will appear as a little dot in the sky, can be seen after the first week of November. And on the 10th and 11th, Mars will sit very close to Mercury, as we've said, so that'll be a good chance to see both. Later on, Mars sits 3.6 arc minutes from Alpha 2 Lebri, which is Zubanel Ganubi, on the morning of the 22nd of November.
That's even closer because Zubanel Janubi is actually a double star, so it's made up of Alpha 1 Libri and Alpha 2 Libri. And the separation of those two stars, or the apparent separation, is 3.8 arc minutes. So Mars will be closer to Alpha 2 Libri than its companion, which is going to be quite interesting to see.
Yeah, that'd be. It'll look like a trinary system just for a moment.
A trinary system, yeah. Okay, well, Jupiter is a very easy to observe planet. It's very well positioned in the evening sky, the early evening sky, and reaches its highest position due south just after 7 o'clock p.m. UT. At that time, it'll be about 22 degrees up, which is pretty good, isn't it?
Yeah, that's not bad at all. The first quarter moon sits 5 degrees south of Jupiter on the evening of the 11th of November. But by the end of the month, Jupiter's southerly position is somewhat compromised by the evening twilight. But still, it's worth observing because changes are always happening on Jupiter, and it's worth keeping an eye out. Moving on to the next planet out, Saturn. Well, as we approach the end of the year, the placement of the gas giants Jupiter and Saturn does start to become compromised by the evening twilight.
Yeah.
Saturn can be viewed at its highest point in the sky due south at the start of the month against a relatively dark sky, but by the end of November, it'll be a struggle due to its position.
Yes, it will. Okay, well, as the sky does darken towards the end of the month, look out for an interesting arrangement of Jupiter, Saturn and Venus, all in a line with Saturn in the middle. And on the evening of the 10th of November, there's a 41% lit waxing crescent moon, 5 degrees to the south of Saturn. So that's a good way to identify the planet if you're not sure which dot in the sky is actually Saturn.
Okay.
Talking of dots in the sky.
Dots, yes. Talking of dots in the sky, the ice giant. So Uranus reaches opposition on the 4th of November, so it's visible all night long. It has an excellent altitude, 52 degrees due south, as seen from the centre of the UK on the time of opposition. Telescope will show its beautiful colour, this greenish blue colour, which I think can be detected in a 10 by 50 finder, but it's certainly obvious in a small telescope.
Yeah.
An interesting effect to watch out for. A bright, almost full moon sits 1.8 degrees south of magnitude 5.7 Uranus on the morning of the 18th of November around 0400 UT.
Yeah, that is interesting actually, because as we head into 2022, the moon is going to have a few close approaches to Uranus, and it will occult the planet twice.
Right.
So
I don't think I've ever seen a Uranus occultation before, so that'll be interesting.
Yeah, definitely. So there are 3 planetary occultations in 2022. There are 2 of Uranus and there's 1 of Mars on its opposition day. So that's going to be something which is going to be very exciting to look out for. We should, please, fingers crossed, get weather to see at least one of those.
You've jinxed it now.
I've jinxed it now. Okay, well, Neptune remains well positioned during November. It's an evening planet located near to, I bet you can't guess, it's magnitude plus 4.2 Phi Aquarii. I say that because it's been near Phi Aquarii forever.
About 100 years, I think.
100 years. But the long, dark November nights allow Neptune to be seen at its highest position in the sky, due south, under dark sky conditions all month long. It shines at magnitude plus 7.9, so you'll need at least binoculars to see it. You can't see it with a naked eye. And a telescope will show it's tiny. It's about 2 arc seconds across, isn't it?
It's very small, yes.
And it has a bluish hue to it. That's what to look out for.
Okay, well, we have some nice specials this month to watch out for, and one I'm particularly interested in is one that occurs on the 1st of November in the morning. A 17% waning crescent moon is showing a favourable libration, which will allow the Mare Orientale region to be seen. This is the Eastern Sea. Now, it's quite ironic that it's called the Eastern Sea because it's located on the western limb of the moon. The reason that has happened is because the east and west were changed around, I think sometime in the 50s. And as a result, the eastern limb became the western limb. So the Mare Orientale became located on the western limb of the moon.
It was to avoid confusion with the astronauts.
Yes, I think that was the reason the IAU changed it, yeah.
Yeah, so basically, I believe this is the case with most rocky bodies. If you've got a gaseous body, it's the other way around. So it takes its cardinal directions from the sky. So you have Jupiter, which is a gaseous body, of course. It's got an eastern limb, which is on the eastern side of the sky.
Yes,
but with the rocky bodies,
it's the other way around. Yeah,
which is very confusing.
No, but this is a fascinating region. It was described long ago in a number of old texts as a vast plain, but behind the Rook Mountains, which are just at the front. It's a very large impact basin, and it is quite a sight. And I have been waiting for years to get a drawing of it because, of course, every time I have had a favourable libration here,
it's been cloudy,
naturally.
It is an amazing thing. You've got the Mont Rook, which I think is one of the largest mountain ranges on the moon, and you've got the Mont Cordillera as well, which is outside of that. So basically, if you were sitting above it, looking down at Mare Orientale, and you have to bear in mind that the mare itself is only the central bit.
Yeah,
it's not that full bull ring as it's often, or bullseye appearance as it's often described. It is just the dark lava plains in the centre of that. And the mountain ranges concentrically surround it.
Yeah,
and inside the mountain ranges, you've got other dark lava pools. You've got, I can't remember their names. There's Lacus autumni, I think, is one of them. But you basically got these dark lava plains, and they act as a delimiter between the mountain ranges, because when you're looking at it, you never get to see it very well at all, because it's in what's called the libration zone. So the moon always looks directly at us with the same face, but that face does change a little bit because of the moon's orbit. It rocks and rolls a little bit, which allows us to see, I believe it's 59% of the moon's surface over time.
That's right.
So when you get a favourable libration, one edge will be rotated further round for you, so you can see features which would otherwise be hidden from you. And that's what's occurring with Mare Orientale at the beginning of November on the 1st. And you should be able to see some of these features, but don't expect to see them clearly, because looking at features which are foreshortened on the edge of the moon are really difficult to determine what's what. And it's here that if you do a sketch or an image, just do it and then look at it later and then try and decode it.
Yeah.
Because it can be really, really confusing.
Identifying the features is very, very difficult when that kind of foreshortening is playing out. When I've drawn other limb features, that's exactly what I do. I make the drawing and then I spend weeks afterwards trying to work out what it is I've drawn. That's good.
A little tip there is to make sure you do enough of it, because it's massive. It covers a huge angular range around the limb of the moon. So
don't
scrimp on the pencils.
No, as if I ever would. All right. Well, another nice event on the 6th of November. Good opportunity to watch Callisto. That's the outermost of the Galilean satellites. Transit Jupiter's disk in the evening. The event begins as the sky starts to darken at around 1645 UT. Callisto will eventually leave transit 2120 UT. So even if it's a bit cloudy, you might get a gap in the cloud and have a look at it. This is a nice one to watch.
That's great. Well, if you miss that on the 9th, there's you'll see that the shadow of Ganymede will be in transit across Jupiter's disk, and that event ends at 1836. So catch Jupiter as soon as the sky starts to darken, and you'll see the end of that event playing out. And Ganymede's shadow is really quite impressive, isn't it?
It is. It's so large. That's the thing. It's quite striking, even in a small telescope.
Yeah. Okay. Well, on the 12th, we've got the northern Torrid meteor shower, which reaches its peak. You may recall last month we spoke of the southern Torrids, and there are actually two streams which are collectively known as the Torrids, but the northern part of that stream reaches its peak on the 12th. And like the southern counterpart, that has a low zenithal hourly rate of just 5 meteors per hour. And it's a broad peak. It lasts for several days, or actually probably over a week. So you've got an opportunity to see these meteors. And if they do occur, they can be quite impressive sometimes. They tend to be slow and with bright trails. So if you see a slow, bright meteor moving across the sky, coming from the direction of Taurus, it could well be a northern Torrid.
Well, we have another chance to spot Ganymede's shadow on the 16th. The transit occurs between 1908 and 2236 UT. At 1400, Ganymede will be transiting Jupiter and covering Io's shadow. Alas, that will not be visible from the UK. The altitude of the planet will be extremely low, in any case, around 3 degrees at that time.
Well, you see, you've thrown the gauntlet down there, haven't you? I know it's 3 degrees and in daylight, but you you should be able to see it.
All right, if it's clear, you should get it and prove me wrong. I think that will be very, very challenging.
I've got a rubbish horizon in that direction, so I'd have to move my telescope to a different location to do it, but I'm sure...
Pete, that takes 2 or 3 minutes. I'm sure you could... That is not going to be the challenge, I can assure you.
Okay. Well... On the 17th, we've got the annual favourite, which is the Leonid meteor shower, but unfortunately this year's shower will be washed out by a bright moon, which is full on the morning of the 19th of November. Now, the Leonids tend to emanate, well, the radiant position is in the head of Leo the Lion, inside the curve of the sickle asterism, which forms the lion's head. And the meteors are really, really swift. I think that's got the fastest entry speed, the Leonid meteors, of all the meteor showers.
Yeah, it's a shame, but the moon will spoil it. But it is worth trying, as you say, Pete. There are often some very bright events, some very bright meteors and fireballs associated with this shower, with the Leonid meteor shower. So worth keeping an eye out if it's clear.
Yeah. Okay, well, on the 19th, we have the full moon, which we just mentioned, and it will be partially eclipsed by the Earth's shadow. From the UK, the event is visible as the moon is setting. It's going to be pretty difficult, to be honest. But the penumbral stage of the eclipse begins at 6:02 UT, with the dark umbral phase beginning at 7:18 UT, just a few minutes before the moon sets behind the west-northwest horizon. There's another challenge for you.
Yes, there's a few difficult ones this time, isn't there? On the 27th, dwarf planet Ceres reaches opposition around this time in the constellation of Taurus the Bull. It'll be available at magnitude 7.0, so you will need binoculars or a small telescope to see it.
Okay. Well, at the end of the month, if you missed Mare Orientale at the beginning of November, you get a second chance, because on the 28th, the southwest limb of the moon is favourably liberated towards Earth in the morning sky. So that will allow you to have another go at this incredible Mare Orientale basin. And we should point out that it's not just on those dates. So look for it a few dates before, and as the liberation is beginning to get better and better, you should still have an opportunity to see it. So don't just pick those dates, pick the dates before as well and have a go.
All right, well, let's move out into the stars and the night sky now. November nights are long, they're often cold, and they're frequently very, very damp. You should see what it does to my notebooks when I take them outside. Autumn constellations are now taking centre stage early on in the evening, and perhaps one of the most obvious ones is the Great Square of Pegasus. The asterism creates a sort of geometric void in the sky, but actually the square of Pegasus in star maps looks brighter and smaller than it actually is. It does actually cover a large area of sky.
It does cover a large area, yeah.
And it's not empty. If you live in a town, if you look, well, you make sure your eyes are properly adapted, so you've been outside in the dark for about 15, 20 minutes, you'll see that there's stars inside the square of Pegasus.
Yeah, there are. If you can't see or count any stars inside the square of Pegasus, then your skies aren't very good, I'm afraid, and you probably live in a city. But typically, you should see 4. If you see 9 or more, then you've got great skies. But if you've got exceptional skies, you can see up to 35 stars, I believe, which is quite incredible.
I don't think I've ever been to a really dark sky when the square of Pegasus has been a prominent position, so I've never done that. I think the most I've ever seen is probably about 12, 15 stars.
Yeah, I think about the same for me. I have been in very dark sky situations, but I never remember to actually count the stars in the square. It's an interesting description, isn't it, a square? Because I often mention this, because none of the sides are of equal length.
No.
On average, they're about 14 degrees.
Yeah.
That would be the average size, which is about the same if you hold your hand out, outstretched at arm's length, and you hold your index finger, that's the name of the one next to your thumb, isn't it, and your little finger, or your pinky, whatever you want to call it, and then you stretch those as far apart as they will go, that distance is about 14 degrees. So that's the average size of the length of the Great Square. So if you've been looking for something which is smaller than that, now you know what size to look for. But of course, of the 4 stars that make up the Great Square of Pegasus, only 3 of them actually belong to Pegasus.
Yeah, it's a very strange thing. I mean, it has to be called the Great Square. You can't really call it the Great Rhomboid, can you? So it has to be called the
irregular triangle of Pegasus, I think.
Yeah, that wouldn't really do it. But yes, as you're quite right. Alpheratz, the top left-hand corner, that is now classed as part of Andromeda. So it's not included in the Great Square of Pegasus, even though it's vital to make up the square. It's part of Andromeda now.
I think it used to be Delta Pegasi.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
And it was changed in 1930 when the IAU, the International Astronomical Union, decided to draw up the constellation boundaries. So they basically transferred Alpheratz into, it wasn't called Alpheratz at the time. I can't remember what its name was, actually. It was something like Syrah, I believe. I might be wrong on that, but it was something like that. And they moved it into, well, they didn't move it, it stayed exactly in the same place, but they reassigned it to belong to Andromeda. And so, those 2 constellations are shown joined together. The Great Square is quite interesting, isn't it? Because we often skirt over this, don't we? That the Great Square of Pegasus is the flying horse. But how does that work with a flying horse? Well, the key is that the constellation is upside down, as we see it from the UK. And we don't see the whole of the flying horse. We only see the torso, the head, and the legs. So the head extends off of the star in the lower right corner, or southwest corner, if you like, which is Alpha Pegasi. And then there's a sort of squashed triangle, down-pointing triangle there, which represents the head. And the star which marks the nose of Pegasus is Enif, Epsilon Pegasi, which is quite close to that lovely globular cluster, M15. Which is a real treat to look for. Yeah,
it's a fine globular cluster, yes. And also we can use the square of Pegasus to find the great Andromeda galaxy. If you draw an imaginary line from Alpheratz to Merak and then turn by about 90 degrees heading northwest, the first naked eye star you can see there is called Mu Andromedae. And if you carry on, just above that there's the fainter Nu Andromedae, and just northwest of Nu, you'll see this elongated fuzzy patch, which is M31, the Andromeda galaxy. And it's actually one of those galaxies that does better in images than visually, because when you're looking at it visually through a telescope, you're just seeing the bright core.
Yeah.
But long exposure photographs reveal the extent of it, and you can see the spiral arms. But it's best on a low power with a telescope.
Yes,
I find.
it is.
Otherwise, you're just zooming right into the core of it.
Well, you got the bonus if you're looking at it. You see M32, which is an elliptical galaxy very close to the centre of the core, and M110, which is I believe that's classed as an elliptical as well. I might be wrong on that, but it's sort of quite elongated, that galaxy.
Yes.
But that's much fainter and a bit further away from the core on the other side of the galaxy to M32. But you can also find another galaxy using M31, because if you go from M31 through Mirac, which is Beta Andromedae, keep going for the same distance again, and you will arrive at M33, which is the Triangulum galaxy.
Yes, this is actually listed as quite a bright galaxy, but in real life, when you're observing it, it's quite a challenge. It's a face-on barred spiral galaxy, and it has quite a low surface brightness because it's stretched out over a large area of the sky. So
I think it's a regular spiral, isn't it? It's not barred.
Oh, is it? Okay, stand corrected. A regular spiral. But the point is that it's actually quite difficult to make out the spiral arms because there isn't a lot of contrast.
No, it's
you
the
do need
core
quite a large
again.
telescope. Yeah, it's the core. You need quite a large telescope or a long exposure photograph to reveal.
Well, it's interesting actually because the M31 is often quoted as the furthest object you can see with the naked eye because it's at a distance of 2.5 million light years. But I have seen the core of M33 from my garden in Selsey when it was very dark with just my eyes, and that's further away. That's 3 million light years away.
Yeah, and I think I have managed to see M81 and M82 from a very, very dark sky a good few years ago now, and they're of course about 12 million light years away.
12 million, yeah.
So, but that was exceptional. That was on top of a mountain, so that's not kind of conditions you get every day.
You always have to go one better.
No, I didn't. You were there. You could have looked, but you didn't bother. So it's not my fault.
Okay. Well, southeast of Triangulum, and Triangulum, we should point out, is a very thin, narrow isosceles triangle in the sky. In mythology, it's supposed to represent the shape of the island of Sicily. And all I can say is that because I draw a lot of charts for Sky at Night magazine, that Triangulum and Vulpecula is guilty of this as well, are two of the smallest constellations which have the longest names. So trying to fit those names onto a chart is an absolute nightmare. But anyway, southeast of Triangulum lies Aries the Ram, and the most conspicuous part of that constellation is, I always describe it as a bent line, but that's what it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's the three stars Hamal, which is Alpha Arietis, Sheraton, Beta Arietis, and Mesarthim, a lovely name, which is Gamma Arietis. And the rest of the constellation sort of extends further to the east. And Uranus is in Aries at the moment. Now, I remember Patrick describing Aries many years ago, and he said, oh, there's nothing in it.
Well, there is at the moment. It's got Uranus in it.
It's got Uranus in it, but it is a bit of a dull constellation. And I think that's probably highlighted by the fact that Hamal, Alpha Arietis, is regarded as being so average that it's used as a baseline for comparison for other stars. So
there you go. It has some uses then for the moment. Well, let's hope for clear skies. There's lots of interesting things to see in the November night sky. Thanks very much, Pete.
Thank you, Paul.